So we'll go ahead and get started, and I'm going to ask each of our panelists to tell us your name, what you're currently studying or what you did study, where you went to study abroad, and what motivated you to have an international experience. And anyone can start.
Start. Okay, I am Alyssa Hilt. I'm majoring in European Studies and minoring in Business and French. So I went on SPU's European Quarter 2013 and traveled through Italy, Switzerland, France, and I spent a little bit extra time traveling through Germany and Ireland as well. And as my major kind of gives away, I've always been really fascinated by Europe. So I came into college knowing that I wanted to have an international experience, but I was also motivated by seeing my sister study abroad and seeing what she got to experience and stuff.
Thank you.
I'm Taylor Cline. I'm a senior. I'm studying psychology here, and I studied in Prague, Czech Republic. And when I was about 12 or 13, my parents had never been to Europe, and they decided they wanted to take a trip over there. So they left us with my grandparents, and they actually rented a motorhome and followed the Tour de France. And so they had an incredible time, came back, and just raved about it. And they kind of had this aha moment of, okay, we want you guys to have this international experience that we just had. And so the thing that made the most sense was study abroad. So ever since, I mean, as far back as I can remember, they were super supportive of, you know, we want you to have this international experience if it's something you're passionate about. And so for me, by the time I got to SPU, it was kind of a no-brainer. I just had to figure out what program I wanted to do.
I'm Jenica Baldwin. I graduated in 2013. I studied business management. I went to Thailand for a semester, and my motivation to study abroad, I grew up traveling a lot but had never been to Southeast Asia and kind of wanted my own adventure. And it was the end of my, well, halfway through sophomore year, and I was kind of getting a little antsy and was like, am I going to transfer? Am I going to study abroad? What am I going to do? And I'd always loved traveling, so I thought, okay, well, I'll go to Thailand by myself and see what happens. And it was awesome. Stay tuned for more.
My name is Camile Wilson. I'm also a senior this year. I studied abroad in the Philippines my sophomore year with the Family and Consumer Science Department at SPU, and then decided I wanted more. So then this last summer I headed to Spain for 2 months, and then also got to travel to Portugal and France, which was really neat. I am studying psychology and then individual and family development, and then I'm minoring in sociology. I wanted to do study abroad probably since I came to college. I had friends and relatives who had studied abroad and had awesome times, so I knew that it's something I wanted to consider. But because I was an RA, it kind of restricted the time that I could go. So finding like summer programs and winter break programs was kind of my niche. So that was my experience, and have really enjoyed having those international experiences.
I'm Joel Dejong. I am a senior. I'm a political science and economics major. I studied abroad in Chengdu, China, through the School of Business, Government, and Economics program in China. They do through a third party, which is awesome. And I decided to go to China for similar reasons. I was feeling pretty antsy, kind of my sophomore year. I'm like, okay, I've got this college thing down, but let's push myself even farther, as well as wanting to see the world from probably one of the most radically different perspectives possible. Going from safe America, very westernized, to an Eastern, non-Christian ethic country was just a very important personal development time for me.
Thank you. So now if you'll tell us what you found most rewarding about your experience, and then also what was most challenging.
I can start with that. So I'll start with challenging, because since my program traveled the entire time, we were never in more than one spot for more than, I think, 2 weeks was the longest we stayed in one place. And because of that, we were traveling through 3 different language zones. So we traveled through places that spoke Italian, Swiss German, French. So it was, you can prepare, and we had practice with Italian and French, but there's still a little, you know, it's a little scary going places where you really don't understand. And suddenly, like, going to the grocery store and buying a pear becomes this, you know, traumatic experience. I think that happened to me. But, you know, you just kind of learn to embrace it and just go with it, go with a smile, and suddenly it's not so bad. And the other challenge with moving so much is it's sometimes hard to get to know one place in that short amount of time, but what I did find really rewarding with that is that you get to embrace the little moments, like getting lost in Rome and then suddenly you're stumbling upon this beautiful street that you had no idea existed before and you'd never find it any other time, or you just decide to go hiking in the Alps or something. So it's the little things that you get to experience going to so many places that was rewarding for me.
I can go next, and I'll start with the challenging as well. So when I was looking at programs, I kind of had the same feeling that Jenica did. I was feeling really restless and kind of wanted to just get out of my day-to-day. So I exclusively looked at programs that were non-SPU just because I wanted to get a different experience. So as I was looking for programs, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to go to a country where I don't speak the language, I don't know the currency, I have no familiarity with it. And so with that, the most challenging thing was being on the other side of the language barrier, which happened quite often. And I spent an entire quarter there, so I was there for 3.5 months, and I had to figure out how to grocery shop, how to pretty much do everything in this other language. And there was a defining moment for me where I had to go to Tesco, which is basically the European version of Walmart, I think is the best way that I could describe it. And I had to get an adapter for my computer in order to get internet because they didn't have Wi-Fi, they had a cable. And I walked up to the counter and wanted to ask somebody if they could help me find it, and nobody spoke English. So I had to spend like 30-45 minutes combing through this electronics department trying to find it. And I kind of had this aha moment of so many people that I've seen come to the United States and have that struggle, and being on the other side of the language barrier, it happened within my first week of being there, and it was kind of just like a trigger for me to be aware of all these different cultural things and phenomena and how they interact. And so that was the most challenging for me, but also the most rewarding. And then as far as the thing that was just completely and totally rewarding was that I started with 19 other people that I had never met before, and by the time I left, we were family. And for me personally, that was the best part of the study abroad experience. I think no matter what city I had gone to, had I done that, it would have been just as incredible. So for me, it was about the relationships and what I was able to do and who I was able to meet while I was there. And also because I was able to spend such a long length of time in this one city, it felt like my home, and I miss it, and it feels like a second home. And I was able to, after the first month, kind of overcome that tourist feeling and have my favorite coffee shops off the beaten path, and have a favorite Czech food that I loved, and just really own the city and feel like it was mine. And so having that sense of ownership and just loving it and feeling like it's another home for me, equally as good as the relationships I formed.
There are a few things that I would agree with. I'd say I have one answer for both the most challenging and most rewarding, and it was going alone. I'll go with the rewarding first to kind of go off what Taylor was saying. We also had a group of 20 students from all over, mostly from the States, but all over the world as well. And that was really cool because it was like, there's something here about these people that is different, because we all wanted to study abroad, but we're all coming from super different walks of life, and got to bond on that aspect. And then there was a really cool expat community there, and being able to know people from all over the world has been one of the coolest things. A couple summers ago, got to go visit a friend who lives in Ireland and went and stayed with her family for a few days. And I was like, how do we even know, I haven't seen you for 3 years, but now I'm staying with your family in Ireland. And so it's really cool to be able to have friends all over the world as well. And they were not there through the program that I was with, but through other Christian organizations that I got plugged into. So the community, I think, was the most rewarding part. And then make me feel not as alone while I was there. And then the most challenging, I think processing it all alone was really hard. When I came back, because I was the only one from SPU, it was like, okay, who wants to hear about no one really knew how to ask about my trip, and no one knew how to engage in that conversation. And so I kind of felt like I was an island when I came back and didn't know how to process it. Because I was in Thailand, it was a lot of, studying the sex industry was really, really hard, and to come back to this America and to come back to SPU's campus was like, oh, it's so great to be back. And I'm like, I just had this really hard experience on the other side of the world for 4 months, and I don't know how to interact in this environment anymore. So I think that was probably one of the most challenging parts for me as well.
Yeah, I think probably piggybacking off of some of the last few things that have been said, I think my biggest challenge was feeling just completely out of place when I moved to Spain for the summer. And on day one, I had this traumatic experience of hopping on the metro. I'd never taken a metro even in America before, let alone in a country that doesn't speak my language. And trying to navigate with a map. I don't use those anymore. I had a map, and it was in Catalan, because I don't speak Spanish, isn't the main language in Barcelona, where I was. So I was on a metro, and I was given explicit instructions to get where I needed to go, and ended up hopping on the wrong metro, ended up on a different side of Barcelona, and then had to implement my really old, rusty Spanish skills. And I think it was very challenging. I had a moment where I thought, what have I gotten myself into? This is day one. But through experiences like that, or getting lost in a city, and stumbling upon really neat places, but also finding that you can figure out how to get back to where you need to go. I think my challenge was feeling out of place, and the biggest reward for me was coming back, realizing what I'm competent to do and what I'm capable of doing on my own. I thought that was really neat.
So I'm going to cheat, and my hard thing also is a beneficial thing, which hard things end up becoming. But the most salient kind of quality from my study abroad trip, I had the ability to teach English in China as a paid position, probably 15 hours a week, which both professionally and personally was just incredibly important. I got to teach English and the ins and outs of the English grammar, which are not by any means my forte, but that was just an incredible way to get to know Chinese youth, right? I worked with kids from the age of 9 to 18, kids who were applying to colleges in the US, and got to talk to them about, hey, this is what college is like in the US. And that just really, that was probably the most powerful way that I connected with individual people from China. But going off of that, the full immersion of culture shock, that you are there in the first 2 weeks again, like, oh, this is sweet, this is awesome. And then kind of 2 weeks later, you're like, but I'm there for the next 3 months. And like, you need to sustain that energy, but you also need to kind of taper that energy and not just, it was good to sometimes go to McDonald's and just sit there and grab an ice cream cone and, okay, it's okay, grab 2 American friends and go there for a while, stream the Seahawks game. But through that though, that became, that push, it was a push. It really pushed me into a way that I was very uncomfortable after the first 3 weeks, and in the end I think that developed me to be kind of a more well-rounded human being.
Thank you all. So the next question is, what do you know now that you wish you had known before you left?
Right, so I know so many more things now. It's hard to just pick one, but I know things not just about, European culture and history and all the things that I learned in class, as good as that all is, but I learned so much about traveling and living with the same group of people for 2 months in a very close situation where you're really having to rely on these people and you're constantly with them, and it was just really good for interpersonal, learning for me. And I also wish that I'd known that you cannot plan for everything. As much as you might try for it, it's just going to change, and things happen. You really have to go with the flow, and you're more flexible than you think you might be. And I really learned that, and it would have made me feel so much more at ease if I'd known that before I left.
Yeah, I think for me, I just know what I'm capable of now. I didn't realize until I came back, wow, I'd left the place I grew up that I had never really left by myself with all these people I didn't know in this country I was unfamiliar with. That's pretty cool. Not a lot of people do that. So I think had I had that confidence going into it, I would have seized a lot more opportunities. Like, for me, the biggest takeaway is that there were a lot of things I wish I had done. It's not what I know now versus what I know then. It's what I wish I could tell myself to do. Because there were all these opportunities. I could have tutored Czech students in English. I could have helped transcribe war stories and correct English grammar. And I, for whatever reason, when those opportunities arose, I didn't take them. And I got to know so many great people, but most of the people I met were from the States, and my biggest regret is that I didn't engage the culture as much as I should have. And so I think think really that's the biggest thing for me. That's what I would stress more than what I know now versus what I know then.
Biggest thing for me was this constant lesson I tried to remind myself of, okay, be present. Like when I get back to Seattle, things are going to be the same. Or are they? And then I kept going back and forth of like, oh, I'm missing out on all this stuff that's going on in Seattle. And I think that was the thing that I kept reminding myself of the entire time of like, this is going to come to an end. Like there will be a time that I go back to Seattle, but I need to soak up what's around me right now and what's in front of me. And so I think there's like sometimes this fear of missing out, and you're not missing out, you're going to have an adventure that like no one else gets to have, and it gets to be your own adventure. So that was the kind of thing that I came back and I was like, all right, being present paid off because I didn't miss out on anything here, and things were mostly the same when I got back. So it was cool to be able to come back and say, I had my own adventure.
I think heading into my trip, I was really concerned about what would be different about being in a different country, and like peanut butter is not a thing in Spain, and I love peanut butter, so then where am I gonna find it when I get there, and how do I stock up on it? Like dried peanut butter, there's gotta be some option. But going in, I think it was neat to have the transition into how can I better embrace the culture here and find a really neat Spanish food that I wouldn't have tried because I'm on a hunt for peanut butter. So learning to embrace something that's different versus just finding things that are comfortable for me, that was something I wish I would have embraced sooner. And another small thing, I wish I would have taken the time to figure out time zone differences and when I would be contacting my family and friends. I think that was a moment when I first got there of I need to call my mom, I have a quick question, and it's 4 in the morning at home. Like really like thinking ahead and planning out like times to contact people at home. I wish I would have done that.
So everyone's study abroad experience is different, but by and large, I learned that people are people in China, people are people in India, they're people if they're Norwegian, if they're Israeli, if they're Australian. I had this moment we were on a rooftop restaurant and I was sitting in a circle of people, we were all eating Chinese food, and there were 15 countries represented. And that there are good and honest people that honestly have your best interest in mind. Yes, there are exceptions to that rule, but knowing that it will be okay, as corny as that phrase is, that there are people looking out for you and in the long run have your best interest in mind. Whether those are people still at SPU or whether those are the random taxi driver that you have to explain in your terrible Chinese, like, I need to get to the university, and realizing there are 15 universities in the city you're at. So.
I just want to echo that because the biggest thing I learned is that people are good. And like there was a big fear component for me of traveling in Europe with a lot of people I didn't know, but I encountered way more good people than bad people. And whenever I traveled outside my program, I met some incredible people in hostels that I still keep up with. You know, the most random people you've ever met to meet. So I think that's a huge takeaway too, is that people are just good for the most part.
Really great wisdom that you've shared. Thank you. The next question we have is, now that you're back, and some of you have had some time to process, or maybe not, I don't know when you left and came back, but how has this international experience influenced your career goals, your hopes for your future? Have they remained the same, or have they been somehow shifted as a result of this experience?
Well, for me, I want to go into archival studies and librarianship, and going and visiting all these, amazing museums and libraries around the world. It just really reinforced my passion for that kind of memory of culture and things like that. But it also gave me some really concrete goals as far as places we visited that I never knew could be possible for a librarian internationally, like the UN and things like that, touring places like that where you think, I could see myself there. But also on another aspect of it, study abroad is so good for job interviews and for just good life skills that you can use in applications and to talk about in interviews and all these things. So that's definitely going to help in future careers.
My answer to that is two-part. First off, for my career, I'm interested in going into industrial organizational psychology. And for those of you who don't know what that is, we do have a great master's program on campus, but it's basically focusing on organizational development. So going in, if you have an organization organization that's kind of just struggling or whatever. It's just helping kind of revamp everything so that you get the most effective organization. And so that was my interest before I left for study abroad, but ever since I was abroad and I saw all the different ways that cultures interact and how you may do something that in your home culture is considered very respectful, it may come off as extremely offensive. And so things like that, and just that was a light bulb for me that I want to focus on companies that are international, and I want to travel all over the world, and I want to work with companies that are expanding. And so for me, it took this idea of what I wanted to do, and then when I found a passion for travel and other cultures, it just honed it into what I want to do. But then on the flip side, it also showed me that my life doesn't have to start as fast as I thought it did. And ever since I came back, I've just been itching to leave again. And so for me, that looks like I'm looking into working and traveling in Australia for a year after graduation, because I kind of realized that there's so much of the world and I'm never going to see all of it, but I want to take as much of it in as I can before I have to dive into a career and, you know, go to graduate school and all those things. And that's a personal decision, and that's not for everybody. But it was also a light bulb for me that I can go and do, and there's still plenty of time for the rest of my life to happen.
I would definitely say I have more of a travel bug, so that's an issue. Good and bad, but definitely have a bigger heart to travel and just gain a bigger perspective of the world. And I think when I came back, applied for the School of Business, got in, and was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I still am kind of up in the air. I think business gave me the opportunity to think differently about business, and then it wasn't until my senior year that I did the social venture business competition and started thinking more seriously about sustainable business, and just my experience abroad really influenced that and kind of pushed me to think about sustainable business a little bit differently. And so I hope to go into that someday. I think that's kind of further down the road. Right now, I think what Joel was saying, it's people, and people all over the world. I think will always continually be fascinated by the diversity that's represented in every place that we are. And I think my perspective on that changed completely when I was back, because I was like, okay, it isn't like nobody's the same, and everybody has a story. And I think being able to see that abroad and then come back and see that go into play was really cool too, because that wasn't something that was as enhanced before I left.
I've always been interested in human service and thought I wanted to do family therapy for a while. I think the process of my junior year of school, taking different classes and then having this international experience really broadened my perspective of the ways that we look at people and relationships with people. I used to be very fascinated by like a micro level, like very face-to-face relationship, but I think seeing a macro perspective of how culture and experience varies and getting to be outside of my little bubble. I've been in Seattle my whole life, so getting to go to a different country with different norms and different expectations was really eye-opening for me, and I think just gave me a bigger appreciation for diversity and how people are so neat, and there's so many different things to be met, needs to be met across the world.
My goal before I went to China was to go to law school and work on international treaties between like states and corporations, and it was going to be great, and I was going to probably hate it after about a few years. But I'm drawing on my teaching time. In the future, I want to become a high school teacher, because I taught something that I'm terrible at and I hate. I taught English grammar, and I loved it. And that I could interact with students they weren't excited to be there, to be real. Their parents wanted them to learn English because it's good to learn English. And to be able to still interact with them and to teach them and to learn together, really it's pushing me, and I'm intending to become a high school teacher sometime in the next 15 years. We'll figure it out. But again, I think this was mentioned a bit, the diversity and the value that has, the uncomfortability that it brings. Diverseness is often uncomfortable, but the deep value it has will impact me whether I work at a school, a government agency one day.
Is it fair to say you've all been changed by the experience?
That's an understatement.
Oh, yeah.
In a good way?
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to introduce Cassandra Sanchez and have her talk a little bit about the study abroad program here at SPU for those of you that are considering it.
Well, I really don't know how to follow that because you guys were absolutely amazing. But my name is Cassandra, and I'm the study abroad advisor at SPU. Is there anyone in the room who's already studied abroad? Okay, awesome. I thought I saw a few familiar faces out there. So I just kind of wanted to go over really quick 5 benefits that study abroad can have on your career. And I think all 5 of these things they've already touched on, which is amazing. But just to kind of put them in a concise way, the first benefit to studying abroad, that the impact that it can have on your career, it strengthens your imperative job skills, such as problem solving, adaptability, dependability, and relationship skills. I think all of those things were mentioned in their discussions. The second one is you gain international connections. So networking really provides you with a big picture perspective on the industry that you're interested in and the global job market. The third benefit is that it increases your cross-cultural sensitivity. Again, something that was echoed on the panel. The fourth benefit, it develops language competency, and it proves that you can successfully communicate in a cross-cultural environment. Or at least semi-successfully, and do it with grace. Right? The fifth benefit, it shows that you aren't afraid to take risks and that you're not afraid to go outside your comfort zone, which is a huge thing that employers are looking for. And so I think, again, that was echoed in spades amongst the panel. But study abroad opportunities are so vast, and there's so many options out there. You can intern abroad, you can volunteer abroad, you can study and intern abroad. You can go during summer, fall, winter, spring, pretty much any time of the year. So if you're interested at all in study abroad, please contact our office. I don't know if I brought enough of these, but hopefully I did. These are just little contact cards for our office, so if you guys want to take one and pass them around. It's got my name, my email, my phone number, our website, basically all of our contact information. My office is in Marston, 245, and I do advising appointments. So again, if you're interested in study abroad, come talk to me. I would love to meet you. I absolutely love my job. I love talking to study abroad, and these guys are just amazing, and I'm so proud of them, and this is why we do what we do, is to hear stories like that. So thanks for having us.
So we'd like to open up, well, that was a great idea. So we'd like to open it up to your questions now. So throw a hand up and go ahead.
So for those of you who went through an SPU program, how immersed in the language of the country you traveled to were you? Or were you, because you said you were in like groups of like 19, 20 other people, did you guys all have classes in English, or were you forced to have classes in, you know, Spanish or Thai or Chinese?
So I went on European Quarter for SPU. What happens for the European Quarter program is that there's actually an entire orientation course that happens the quarter before you leave. And it's like, there's a history aspect, there was language aspect for both Italian and French. So we were able to have a little bit of preparation before we even left, which meant that when we were in the country, we were able to already have that background. And what we did is we fit in class. We had classes on the bus, we had classes in a park, we had classes, I think, once in a classroom, but they were usually in French. For the level that I was at, our professor was able to have it so that she had different groups depending on what your language skill was at. There were some people who weren't necessarily there for the language, so they had their part in English, but then there were other more advanced groups that had theirs in French. So they were really good about changing it and being really flexible on what you were able to do and what you're comfortable with doing. And we did have certain assignments where we had to go out and interact with people in the city and like order things from a restaurant or grocery stores and things like that in the language. And that was part of our final exam, so we did that.
Yeah, it's really hard.
It's harder than it seems.
I didn't go through an SP program, but all my classes were taught in. I had to take a 3-week Czech intensive course when I first got there, and it was so hard. There's like so few vowels in the Czech language. But once that was gone and I could like order tea and check and I was good to go, it was, all of them were taught in English, but because it was non-SPU, it was kind of intermixed internationally. So it was Czech natives teaching in English, and the student population of the classes was all international, so all the different perspectives that were flying around were awesome. I got to experience all that and get exposed to that, but I was comfortable enough that I was able to understand it, and it was in my own tongue, and it was all good.
I didn't go through an SPU program either. We took a Thai language class while we were there. It's a tonal language, and it's very difficult for somebody that grew up like that. But we would order things off the street all the time and go into like off campus and go hang out with people. And we lived in an international dorm, so we all had Thai roommates as well, which was a cool experience. Because my roommate, I mean, they were all in the international dorm because they're like, we want to learn English and we want to be with other international students. So it was cool to have that bond. My roommate didn't speak English very well, so I would help her with the English homework sometimes, or we'd use the translator sometimes. So not fully immersed, thank goodness. I wouldn't have passed. So.
Yeah, so my program again wasn't through SPU, but I did take a Spanish language course while I was there. And through my program, I had a homestay experience, so I lived with a family who obviously speaks the language very well, and they also spoke English, so that was neat to get that experience of them helping me through how to phrase certain things. Or I would come home and say, I tried saying this when I was at like a public place, and people gave me weird looks, like, what did I actually say, or how do I need to adapt this for later? So I think that that was a neat experience to work with a family who's open to having people come into their home. But also taking a class in a university there that was in Spanish. And so you're getting a classroom experience, but also when you walk outside the classroom doors, it's like, this is your real classroom of how do I learn from people who are actually from here, which is neat.
And the trip to China is not through SPU, it's through a third party. But the classes are taught by people who have a good-ish grasp of English. Two of my props actually were Canadian, and they had a fantastic comprehension of the English language. I had one professor who was less so, but we made it through. She is an expert in her field, and we gave her a lot of respect for that. And in the end, we got a great, it was like a social class that we took, and in the end, we still got a great education. We took a crash course in Chinese class, which could have gone better. Again, tonal languages, guys, are really hard. And the Chinese language has like 800 characters or something ridiculous. I don't know. No, I think it's more like 80,000. But anyway, so yeah, that's my answer for that.
Other questions? What would you like to know? We'll go here and then there.
Okay. Some of you might have touched on this, but from after you come back from your study abroad experience, did you have an inclination towards wanting to work abroad? And whether or not that's yes or no, how do you think the things that you've learned from studying abroad would help with working professionally abroad?
For me, yes, it did give me a desire to work internationally, and like I said, it kind of gave me some options of what might work. But because of the nature of the program, it didn't really give me like network opportunities because we were traveling. But it did, I mean, we were in a group constantly, so again, like interpersonal skills, working with other people in this kind of situation, and those are all skills that I can use in any business situation or, you know, international situations that worked.
Yeah. So for me, I came back and there was like the huge reverse culture shock letdown. So I definitely, from the minute I got back, wanted to find either a job or an internship or something else abroad. But I think the biggest thing about my shift in perspective was that level of confidence. After I came back, it was like, okay, I've lived somewhere where I didn't know the language. I figured out how to survive. So it just opened up a lot of doors, not outside of myself, just in my mind, of like things that I could potentially look into or say yes to that I wouldn't have thought of before. So looking for international internships and jobs, or thinking, yeah, I could do this, rather than being intimidated by having to pick up and move. So I think just kind of that say yes to everything attitude just kind of has shifted what I think I'm capable of, and what opportunities I think I'd be able to seize moving forward.
You don't have to answer.
Or answer.
Yeah, if you don't have a desire to work internationally, that's okay.
No real
I want to
desire.
travel. I want to keep traveling. That was my takeaway.
So another question in the back?
Yeah, so I have two questions. Okay, first, for those who didn't do their study abroad or SPU, did you run into difficulties like applying or just like transferring the credits or whatever? And second question, how did you pay for it? Usually scholarships.
Guys, okay. First off, when I did apply, it was pretty difficult because there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through, but since I applied, it's all been online and automated, and Cassie's worked so much on it, and it's seamless and wonderful and amazing. So there aren't a lot of hoops to jump through, and the great thing about SPU is that you have to apply for them to accept the program that you want to do, so you know before you even leave that the credits are going to transfer. So there's no question about it. So they're not going to let you take a class that's not going to transfer, so it's pretty seamless as far as that goes. And then paying for it, so I'm a global ambassador for my study abroad program, so I work really closely with the study abroad office in Cassie, and I have a huge passion for study abroad, so please come up to me afterwards. I'm here to answer questions. One of the biggest misconceptions is cost, and there are hundreds of thousands of dollars in scholarships that go unused because people just don't apply for them. And so for me, it was a lot of budgeting. I had been saving since I was 16 because I was planning on studying abroad, so a lot of my spending money once I was there was taken care of, but just looking for those loans, looking for those scholarships. For me, it was a combination of all of those together that made it possible for me to go. And you know, it was a bit of a financial burden, but for my family and for me, it was worth it to take that on. And so it's a personal thing for everybody, but there are totally ways to make it work. So you just have to scour the internet for hours like I did and just find those scholarships that are applicable to you, and there's just all sorts of different opportunities to make it work financially.
Nice little commercial there for Cassandra.
Yeah.
Amen.
I did mine through business school, which has a partnership with University Study Abroad Consortium, which is like a company that sends people abroad. And it was pretty seamless, the application process. I lucked out. My credits transferred for both my economics and my political science degree, so I got like 30 credits for studying abroad for 4 months. But I don't know if the professors know that yet, so that was exciting. But as far as finances go, that individual trip was incredibly cheap, substantially cheaper than going to SPU. We did it through like University of Idaho, which is a cheaper institution than Seattle Pacific is. And I taught abroad. I made money studying abroad, which was great. So I came out above zero. So I was pretty happy about that.
That doesn't happen often.
No.
I had to jump through a lot of hoops, but I think things have changed since I applied.
It's beautiful.
I love that status. And scholarships. Sometimes they have scholarships through the programs that you apply through as well. And then I was on scholarship at SPU for a portion of it, and that you can reapply to get those when you get back. So it's not like, peace out, not getting any more scholarship money, which was nice as well.
Yeah, and like the program I did, they had a relationship grant. So because I went through this company that has a relationship with SPU, that was already $1,000, I think, off my program, which was like, okay, cool, no brainer.
Is there anyone of you who work in international organization right now, or works something related to travel experience that you guys have had?
Any of you work in an international organization?
I mean, I have a role with my study abroad program, and so basically my job since I've gotten back is to share my experience. So I meet a lot with SPU students one-on-one. They have a lot of questions. It's a smaller campus. There are less, you know, the study abroad office is only 2 people, so there aren't a ton of big events. So I've just been focusing on trying to meet with people. I'm basically just here to answer any questions. So I'm pretty well versed in not SPU programs necessarily, but the programs that the program I studied abroad with offers. So I've kind of learned a lot more about different people who went through the same company but different opportunities and different locations. So I've just become a little bit more well versed about like the different cultures and that sort of thing. So that's really the biggest. That's the role that I have that's international, I suppose.
I've worked pretty closely with Bethany Christian Services, which is a refugee organization. And so I work very closely with a family from East Africa, which has very little correlation to China, but I don't know, it lets you, like you see them go to the grocery store and like they don't get it, and you're like, I understand why you don't get it, because I've not gotten it before. And so I guess there's this human development aspect that just lets you get a better window into that.
So we'll continue with questions, but I just want to acknowledge if some of you have classes that you need to leave a little early for, feel free to do that. Just do that quietly. Anyone else have questions for our panel? Anything you want to know?
Yeah. How much time did you get to like just travel and explore the country that you were in while you were there? I mean, if you had to put it like percentage-wise or like fraction-wise.
In my program, we were constantly traveling, but every city that we went to, we had 3 days built in that allowed us to explore the city by ourselves. They were really good about making side trips planned, so we didn't feel like we needed to account for those on our own. They had the arrangements already set for these side trips. Particularly in Paris, we had a lot of extra time to go explore what we wanted. And then afterwards, they had planned our program so that it ended a couple weeks before the end of the quarter, which basically gave us 2 whole weeks that we were able to either come back early, nobody did that, or go travel on our own. So like I went to visit family in Germany, and then I went to Ireland for the next 2 weeks. So that was really beneficial because you didn't feel like you were getting behind as far as getting summer jobs and things like that, because you were back at the same time as everybody else, but you had a whole 2 weeks just free.
So the reason I ultimately chose my program is because it had those trips built in. So I was in one place for 3.5 months, but I'd say every 2 to 3 weeks we had an international excursion. So I studied in the Czech Republic, but with my program, I went to Austria twice, I went to Germany twice, I went to, where else did I go? I went to Hungary on my own, but I traveled internationally multiple times. I went to Austria twice in Austria. And so it was like every 2 to 3 weeks, the whole program, all 20 of us would get on a bus and we'd just drive. And we had this tour guide who was with us for the whole program. He was this really old guy, his name was Z. I'm pretty sure he knows like literally everything under the sun. And he would, when we'd get there, he would do a tour, and then we'd pretty much just have most of the time to ourselves. So I got to see all these great, big, beautiful cities, and I didn't have to stay in that country. And I know a lot of friends who did their own international travel, and they were gone almost every single weekend, which wasn't for me because I wanted to like kind of just have that be my city and my place. But yeah, I'd say every 2 to 3 weeks I was packing up and going somewhere, going to a different country.
Traveling in Asia looks a lot different than traveling in Europe. My sister studied abroad in Europe, kind of the same thing, got to travel a lot, jump on a train here in another country. I went out of the country once. I went to China for my fall break for like a week and a half. But we had like field trips through our program, so we'd go to different parts of Thailand. We were kind of in the north central part in the north. So we could go to the border up top and go a little bit south to Bangkok. So we got to do that with our program, but I didn't do a lot of outside traveling, which was, I think I was like, oh, I'll go visit a friend in China, and it's like, it's not like jumping on a train. It's like 2 days and I'll be there kind of thing. So a little bit different in Asia.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of travel opportunities built in, and yeah, it might just be the ease of travel in Europe. It is once the expense is really getting to Europe. Once you're there, intercountry travel is very inexpensive. But I plan to travel afterwards, and my sister actually flew to Spain and we traveled together, which was a really neat opportunity. But a lot of people in my program like decided they wanted to travel somewhere while they were in the program, and would find other people who had similar interests, and like if there was a weekend free, would fly over to London for the weekend or whatnot. So there is that opportunity as well to plan trips while you're there with people who have similar interests. There's lots of opportunities for that.
I think on the China trip they had 4 very organized like overnight trips. One of them to the base of the foothills of the Himalayas. So that was awesome. And then we had the Communist Party holiday, which meant we got a whole week and a half off. where me and my friends jumped on a train and said, we'll figure out where we're going. And we got to some cool place and we hung out there for a week. So yeah, I'm guessing 7th or 8th of our time was actually just free time to go off and gallivant all around China. But again, international, like you kind of stick within China. China's like the 3rd largest country in the world. There's a lot of space to travel around there.
Okay, what we'll do now is we'll break the formal presentation and do some networking. Any of you are welcome to come up and talk with our panelists. Before we do that, I want to just give a commercial for the Center for Career Calling and to say if you do have an international experience and you want help learning how to put it on your resume or using it in a job interview, we're happy to help you with that because it's a really powerful experience and it can influence a lot of things that you do in your career and your life.